governance and leadership will make sure that the rest of the other 7 components is running as appropriate. So that's why it is important for the firm to know that as an auditor, you have a public interest role. Second thing is that it is important for the practice to demonstrate very high ethical values, the correct attitudes with the right ethical approach. Responsibilities of all personnel and their expected behavior, whether it's on the engagement performance or over the system of quality management. Why system of quality management? Because you will have somebody who's managing the SOQM. So you would need them to be objective, to be competent, to have the time to manage whatever they need to manage. And because of this, the governance and leadership it has an impact on the firm's strategic decision and action. And under ISQM, okay, you will have to prioritize. You have to prioritize quality over profit. It is a requirement under the standard itself. That means you have to prioritize quality over profit. And there are, of course, new requirements addressing leadership's behavior and commitment to quality. And this can be seen from the organizational structure, the assignment of roles, and the responsibility being introduced within the practice. So under the system of SOQM again, the firm shall assign the ultimate responsibility and accountability to the firm's managing partner, or if the firm operates through a board of partners, the managing board of partners. Okay, but in addition to that, they can always assign operational responsibility for the SOQM to a different person, and this different person will then report to the managing partner or the managing board of partners. And in terms of operational responsibility, there are suggestions that you can come out in real life and independent requirements, monitoring and remediation process. These are the 2 areas that's mentioned in the ISQM itself. But at the end of the day, it depends on how you design the SOQM, and you can have a multiple level of responsibility, reporting to, and so on. But at the end, all the lines will go out to the firm's managing partner or managing board of partner. So ask yourself, as you start your implementation journey, who is responsible for the SOQM? That's quite straightforward. Do you need to have a different person in charge of ethics and independence? And do you need to have a different person in terms of monitoring and remediation of SOQM? Now, for smaller practices, for example, you may not have the resources for monitoring and remediation, because remember, one of the person who do the monitoring and remediation must remain objective. But if your firm are small and everyone is involved in the engagement itself, it is very difficult to find somebody who is objective. Don't even talk about independent, we're talking about objective here. So in this case, the firms may decide that it is better to outsource and get somebody to come in and do a co-file review, for example. So in this case, when you outsource, then you will end up with the service provider, and then you will then look back at the quality objective of a service provider and make sure that you manage the risk on using the service provider itself. And like I said, evaluating the SOQM, MIA of Malaysia is one step ahead. Even before this is a requirement of the ISQM, all of you have been doing it under ISQC. Remember your audit license renewal? So because it is now in ISQM, it needs to be documented also how you arrive at the reasonable assurance conclusion for your system of quality management. And now look at the paragraph 28B and C, which I mentioned earlier in the table. And the firm shall take periodic audit evaluation. That means the firms will have to do a SOQM evaluations on a periodic basis. In the standard, is suggested annual, but there may be instances that you may need to do it on a more regular basis, especially if you have failed in your SOQM assessment. You may not want to wait until 1 year later to do another assessment. So you may want to do it on a more closer date to make sure that you have so-called close out any deficiency gap itself. And when you evaluate the SOQM, you have 3 bases like conclusion, just like an audit, except for disclaimers. Okay, so achieve true and fair, except for and not achieved. Well, this is very serious when you arrive at the conclusion that it has not achieved what is intended to do, the SOQM. Okay, so what do you do when you are at the action for or non-achieved sections? First, you need to take prompt and appropriate action, and you need to document down what are those. Communicate to teams and others assigned with SOQM activities. Those people monitoring, to tell them what are the defects and how they can communicate to teams and others assigned with SOQM activities. Those people monitoring, to tell them what are the defects and how they can make sure that it doesn't happen again. Communicate to external parties in accordance with the firm's policy and procedure if there is any. So in certain circumstances, you may need to communicate with, let's say, AOB or even MIA upfront before the practice review or before the firm inspection started, to say that these are the issues and you are in the process of remediations. So it's like advanced disclosure before they come in and find out. Also, like in tax, you can disclose earlier, and hopefully you get a remission for the penalty and so on. And assigning more resources and guidance to confirm that reports are appropriate. Now, if there is a not achieved status, you need to look back at all the reports that you have issued and ask yourself whether the reports are appropriate or not. And if the reports are not appropriate, you may need to then take legal advice and see whether there's a need to reissue the reports and so on and so forth. As serious as that. So don't play as far as ISQM is concerned. Okay. This is a self-assessment checklist in your audit license renewal form itself or actual form itself. So again, these are areas that the ASP, our Auditing and Assurance Standard Boards, will need to be revising this form so that by the 15th of December, the effective date of ISQM, the new forms will be already in place. Okay, so this is just an example of what is the difference between the ISQC and the ISQM. What are the changes? Now, if you want to know in more detail what are these changes, please go and look for the first time implementation guide issued by ISSB, where they have a comparison between ISQC and ISQM in many of the components. I think this is the one where a lot of firms, or I have been in communication with some firms, and they say this is the area that they have the most challenge in firm risk assessment process. And I can understand that because this is new. This is a risk-based approach in designing, implementing, and operating the component of SOQM in an interconnected and coordinated manner. So the risk-based assessment is embedded in ISQM through the establishment of the quality objective. Remember the 35 points which I mentioned earlier? The firm will then have to identify and assess those quality risks. Are these low risk, moderate risk, or high risk? And then put in the response, appropriate response to address the quality risk itself. So the quality objective obviously has been set by the standard, but you can pick those that is not relevant to you and throw it away and apply only those that is relevant to you. But you also need to look at other law, regulation, or professional standards, because this may come with additional quality objective. Right? So again, depends on what type of client you have. Are they in a specialized industry? Are there some specific rules and regulations that you need to be aware of? And does it have an impact to your audit quality? If it is, then you need to then manage that risk, okay? And then the risk assessment process may be centralized or decentralized. In what sense? It depends on how you operate. If you are a firm with various branches, it can be done by the central body and de-escalated to the rest of the branches, or it could be each branch will manage their risk assessment separately, depending on the structure of the practice is. And looking at the environment, the law, how your business models, are there additional quality objectives that you need to put in place? This is the question that you need to ask yourself after you have gone through Para 28 to Para 33. As I have mentioned earlier, if you are a very typical SMP, Para 28 and Para 33 should be able to cater to all your quality objective already. So then you need to assess the risk and then do the appropriate responses as required. And in the process of identifying and assessing quality risk, of course, you have to look at the complexity and operating characteristic of the practice, your strategic, operational, decision, actions, and so on and so forth. The management style of the leadership, the resources at your disposal and available to you. You use service providers because law and regulating and governing your practice, governing your clients' operations, and so on and so forth. The nature and extent of the network. Do you rely on a network support? This is in addition to the other service providers. If you are in the network, so maybe you will be using some of the network services as support. Type of engagement performed and reports to be issued, and type of entities which such engagements are undertaken. For example, if it's PLC clients, you may need to have engagement quality review (EQR) for that particular clients of yours. So in this case, all this will have an impact on how you do your risk assessment. And here, the more important box is the middle part. So when you are doing the risk assessment stuff, ask yourself, what is the possibility of that risk occurring? And if it occurs individually or in combination with others, it will have a severe effect, adverse effect on the quality objective. If these two elements are there, the word is and. That means it is occurring, it happens, and then it has a significant impact. So it is not all, it is and. So it's occurring and have a significant impact on the quality objective, then yes, it is considered a high risk, and in this case, you would then need to design a response to that quality of risk itself, which you have identified earlier. You can look at, in the standard, you can look at the application material P46 for some of the examples where you assess the quality risk itself. So please go and read the standards. And at the end of the day, when you are designing and implementing the responses, make sure that it addresses the quality risk. And then on top of that, take note of the specific responses. As I said, there are only 6 specific responses under parameter report. And these are dealing with relevant ethical requirement, independent declaration, complaints and allegations, acceptance and client continuance, the processor, then the communication to those charged with governance if you are auditing PLC or you are registered under AOB and all this, and of course, engagement quality review if you have a certain client profile. Now, one thing you have to bear in mind when we talk about responses, right? Sometimes when you implement responses, it can address different or multiple quality objectives. For example, when you implement a channel for dealing with complaints, this channel can be used to address issue of non-compliance with relevant ethical requirement, non-compliance with independent. The staff, if they are aware, they can use this channel to raise their complaint. Or in terms of acceptance and client continuance, the engagement partner may notice something and then they can channel the complaint back to the central body that is in charge of client acceptance, or the client acceptance may be aware of certain issues with the client, and they can then channel the complaints to the engagement partner. So in this case, as I mentioned earlier on, it is one particular response, but then it can hit various quality objectives. So it doesn't mean that one quality risk, you must have one response. So sometimes one response can address multiple quality risks and vice versa itself. So please be innovative when you're looking at your firm's practices and see what are the areas where you can hit multiple quality objectives, dealing with multiple quality risks when you are setting the responses yourself. And when you are designing and implementing responses to address the quality risks, of course, all this will have an impact of how often or when do you do the responses. Like for example, if you are doing a review as a response, you will have to ask yourself whether the file review, is it before the engagement is being issued, or you are talking about a cold file review. So when is it more appropriate? It all depends on what are the quality risks that you are trying to address. If you are trying to address a quality risk where the partners doesn't spend enough time on their engagement, then to review to have a full review 3 years later may not be an effective monitoring process. So in this case, the response could be that you have a policy procedure where there is a concurrent partner review to make sure that the engagement partner has spent appropriate time on the engagement before the engagement can be signed off by the said engagement partner. So it all depends on the nature and what are you trying to achieve by implementing certain responses. And all these preferably will be captured in your P&P, policy and procedures document itself. The timing, when is it to be done? Is it in the process, immediately after the process, or it could be here, or can you wait until 3 years for the co-file review as part of the monitoring process? And then the extent is that what are you reviewing? Is it the engagement file or certain engagement? For example, the firms may say that property development clients are very complex, so these engagements will be selected for co-file review on a more regular basis and so on. So you can vary the response depending on what you're trying to achieve at the end of the day itself. Okay, so this is some of the examples in the risk register that you may want to consider. Like for example here, you're trying to deal with the culture of the firm does not support a commitment to quality, and how do you respond to that? So this is some of the examples, and for this I have to thank Video for sharing some of these examples with us as part of this awareness program. So you always ask yourself whether the responses that you have put in, is it robust enough? Is it timely? And this is very important because under the monitoring and remediation process, you are mandatory to have this co-file review. That means you need to get somebody to go and do a co-file review because at the end of the day, no matter how good your system is, the final product, which is your file itself, will be the final arbiter in as far as the firm's quality practice itself, right? So that's why you need to have a full file review, and in the standards, although it is not in the standard, is in the application material, it has suggested that if you are doing an audit engagement, it has to be every 3 years maximum. That means you can have a shorter period. But if you are doing other assurance engagement but not audit, then you can extend it to 5 years and so on. But that means you will still need to review files for review engagement, AUP, and so on and so forth. Because these are all caught under the ISQM standard itself. Okay, what is the purpose of the monitoring and remediations? Is so that the firm has relevant, reliable, and timely information. Relevant, reliable, and timely information. So you need to put in a monitoring and remediation process. And of course, if there are defects, then you need to take appropriate action to identify deficiency and make sure that it is remediated on a timely basis. And taking appropriate actions will include even considering where the engagement has been issued, whether it is appropriate or do you need to balik the engagement and issue a new engagement and so on. So under the ISQM, of course, there's a new framework on root cause analysis, and I hope to run a webinar towards the end of this year on what RCA is all about. Hopefully that you will learn and be able to implement it. So the various aspects of the MR process can be broken down into design and perform monitoring activities. So this is where you have to decide who are the person responsible for this, evaluate the findings after you perform the monitoring activities. What are the findings? What does it mean? Do you need to do a root cause or not? And then with the findings and of course the solutions, you need to then communicate up and down the firm itself. So what does the firm monitor? Obviously, to the right person, the design and operation of the firm's risk assessment process. Are they appropriate? Have they identified all the risks? Have they designed the appropriate responses? And then addressing network requirement if you have a network. And of course, all these things will have the leadership to evaluate the system of quality management on an annual basis itself. Now, I think I would like to draw your attention to this term also, AQI. A lot of the firm registered with AOB will understand what is AQI, Audit Quality Indicator. These are indicators which will show you whether your system is working as intended or not. And if the indicator is negative, it then will tell you that or will indicate that over the future period, your firm's quality is going to be impacted. So it is an early indicator so that you can then implement the appropriate responses in that respect. So you can always go and look for these reports under the Financial Reporting Council and look at what are the AQI that is being tracked by the big firms. Of course, here they do the, this is from the UK. They have done a survey in 2020 over all the big six in the UK. What are the AQI they have used to track their audit quality? So as a firm, you can consider this as part of your tools to manage the audit quality going forward. But of course, whether you need to drill down to that extent, I will leave it to the firm's wisdom to decide how they want to design the gathering of information, do the necessary ratio analysis, and then use that information to see what are the areas they need to improvise in their practice itself. So I think this slide is very important. I would like to urge the SMP to look at our dedicated website on quality management, where we have all the first-time implementation guide. As I said, these are very, very useful documents. It shows the transition from ISQC to ISQM and what you need to do in terms of first-time implementing these new standards. The dedicated websites in MIA, we have videos on firm risk assessment process. So those who say they doesn't know how to do a FRED, please go through that video and 1 hour long video and deal with resources, deal with monitoring and remediations, and how do you evaluate the system of quality management. So please download all these materials. So please refer to MIA because we have been sending out a lot of information. And for example, there's changes to the engagement team fact sheets, and we are sending out the circular early next week. So please read through all these fact sheets to tell you what is the significance of the change from the previous ISA 220 to the revised ISA 220. Think about it. Who in your practice is in charge of making sure the audit program is up to date? Who in your firm is in charge to make sure that the company side everybody understand? Because bear in mind, company side there's going to be changes coming up. Companies Amendment 2022 is coming up. So are you going to follow those changes? In terms of SQM implementation, whether it's a big bang or by stages, we leave it to the firm, but it looks like it doesn't have much of a choice. It has to come into effect on 15th of December 2022. But the good news is that for the monitoring and remediation function, the efficacy of M&R, you will still have another 1 more year to test that process to make sure that it is running. But by 15th of December 2022, you need to know what are you going to monitor and how are you going to monitor it, who is in charge, and how often is the monitoring, and what are the results that you would be expecting from those monitoring activities. So those must be in place as of 15th of December 2022, but you will have 1 more year to make sure that you can refine the M&R process. And of course, the evaluation of the system of quality management, you will have at least 1 more year, December 2023, for you to evaluate whether your SOQM is operating with reasonable assurance or not. Okay, please bear in mind, look at this para 58, which talks about the documentation you need to put into place. And of course, you need to document the quality objective relevant to you, the quality risk, how do you create those risks, low, medium, high, and then what are the responses that deal with it. Basically the risk register, which you have seen as an example from a video, and how the system of quality management evaluation has been performed. And because this evaluation will have to be done by the end of December 2023, taking into consideration the results of the M&R.